Welcome, everyone. I'm Daniel Joseph, and you're on the Corner Fringe. And today I want to talk about something that no one on planet Earth is talking about, and that is the coronavirus. Forgive me for being facetious. Obviously, everyone is talking about this. However, I do want to address something that I'm getting a lot of emails and calls about, feedback about, and that is, what is the appropriate response of the church in light of all these governmental executive orders and mandates that are being implemented throughout the country that are prohibiting churches from actually assembling, that are being able to meet whether on Saturday or whether on Sunday, etc., any day of the week virtually, that they are no longer being able to assemble. See, because there's two camps that are really starting to form right now. One camp says there's not a chance. We're not going to abide by this. We have a constitutional right. Our First Amendment is being destroyed. And you know what? Because we're going to be meeting for the sake of God, that's a higher calling. So we're not going to listen to the governing authorities. And I'll share with you in a moment that that's not going too well. And the second group says, you know what? I think we need to be compliant. I think we need to think about Romans 13, 1 Peter 2, where we need to subject ourselves to the governing authority and be able to walk that out. And I'll just read that. It's worth reading. And what it says in Romans chapter 13, verse 1, let every soul be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. I want to talk about where Corner Fringe Ministry lands and why we're there right now. We would land in the latter. In other words, we think it is appropriate, absolutely, under the current situation, that we follow Romans 13, that we follow 1 Peter 2, that we subject ourselves to the governing authority, knowing the state at this point, or the federal government, they are not asking us to compromise our faith in any way. They're not asking us to worship a false god. They're not asking us to throw away the Torah. They're not telling us we can't circumcise our children. You know, we could go on and on. Certain things that we saw in the Hanukkah story that did not play out so well for the Jews when these Greeks went in and started forcing mandates that required compromise of their faith. They're not prohibiting right now for us to pray. In fact, they're encouraging, and this can be seen through exemptions. I'll talk about that in a moment. They're encouraging that churches hold services, but just simply online and not physically assembling together. And at this point, this is where we need to be as a body. I really think we could be setting a bad precedent to the world, and not just simply to the government, but to the world, where it's going to leave a very distorted picture of who we're supposed to be in Yeshua. Now, there's a lot of debate that is going on right now in regard to this throughout churches throughout the country, because churches are starting to divide on this matter. And I have no reservation about sharing where we stand right now on Romans 13 under the current situation. However, in the future, if that is to change in any way, we will be changing our position, absolutely, with no question. In other words, if there's any part of this that is going to be requiring us to compromise our faith and our allegiance to God and His commandments and our confession, we will take the stand against that. That's when, Paul's not talking about subject yourselves to governing authorities when that governing authority is to tell you to worship Baal or Molech or any other false god. That's when you have problems. Or to abandon commandments, forcing you not to keep certain commandments. Yeah, that's where you draw the line. And so I think it's important that we have good attitudes during this time. The government, whether state or federal, at this point is not zeroing out churches in this stay-at-home policy or mandate. It's for everyone. There's no discrimination whatsoever. It's the entire population that they're imposing this upon. And so based upon everything that we have right now, I think this is the appropriate course of action. And so this is where we stand. I don't know if you've been reading the news lately, but there are pastors that don't stand on that. There are pastors that believe their First Amendment rights are being destroyed and being hindered. There are pastors that believe that they're being inhibited from worshiping their God. And one case is found in Tampa. This just came across my desk today, and it's worth sharing with you. That, let's see, the headline, where's the headline here? And the headline actually reads, "Arrest warrant issued for Tampa megachurch pastor who led PAC services despite safer at home orders." And we read within it, Sheriff Chad Cronister and State Attorney Andrew Warren on Monday announced that an arrest warrant had been issued for Pastor Rodney Howard Brown. I know many of you probably know who he is. He's quite big in the Pentecostal arena. And now he's got an arrest warrant for him because what he did is last week is he held services on Sunday and totally ignored the stay-at-home. And I guess he had over 500 people at one of his services. And so it looks as though they're going to make an example out of him. And actually, here's a quote. "I think it's unfortunate that the pastor here is hiding behind the First Amendment," said State Attorney Warren. One, it's absolutely clear that emergency orders like this are constitutional and valid. Second of all, leaders from our faith-based community across this country have embraced the importance of social distancing. And so, interesting, right? That we see it's getting real. We see it's getting real. Now, I want to be clear, and I'm sure there's some of you that may commend Rodney Brown for what he's done. I commend him on conviction. I don't think what he's doing is right in the current context. I believe what he's doing would be right in a different context where he's being required to compromise his faith, but not in the current context. And so this is going to become problematic. You could talk about I got another article across my desk today on de Blasio, the mayor of New York. And actually I have it right here. Listen to this. He says, "A small number of religious communities, specific churches, and specific synagogues are unfortunately not paying attention to this guidance, even though it is so widespread." I want to say to all those who are preparing for the potential of religious services this weekend, if you go to your synagogue, if you go to your church and attempt to hold services, after having been told so often not to, our enforcement agents will have no choice but to shut down those services, he added. And so, again, it's getting real, it's getting serious, and they're going to start cracking down on this. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because there's a lot of people, fundamentalists, patriots of this country, who I respect very much in regard to wanting to protect the Constitution. It's going to be interesting how this plays out, because this hasn't really been tested constitutionally in the sense of under what's going on. We've never experienced the coronavirus response like this by the government. Yes, we had the Spanish flu. The difference is the government didn't respond the way it's responding today. And so really what we're going to be testing is the government's response to this, if there's any court cases that come out of this. However, I'll be honest with you, I don't think they're going to fare too well in regard to the churches totally disregarding the mandate. And here's why. Is because there's, be honest with you, there are new and profound ways of circumventing the Constitution. Every day they're designing these things, and it's really sad. But they're going to definitely stand on the whole aspect of that we're in a crisis situation, and because you're inhibiting the well-being of another person, you're posing a threat to their life. Therefore, you're infringing upon their life in pursuit of happiness and their constitutional rights as a citizen of America. There's so many ways that they could spin this in their favor, and I think in courts that are heavily left-leaning, unfortunately, where you have a judicial system. You talk about your three branches of government: your executive, your legislative, and the legislative can create the laws, the executive can enforce them, but who cares? The greatest power of the three is the judicial, those who interpret them. And you think about that, there's a boatload of power in the judicial system. And all you need to do is look into history at major cases that have gone to the Supreme Court and have changed the course of our history. Such as Roe v. Wade, right? And so as we look at what's going on, I know there's a lot of conflict within a lot of believers. There's conflict within me, because the worst part of it is when you see what's happening in our country and it's calculated and you see the spirit of Antichrist behind it. I see what he's doing, and no, I don't like it. I absolutely detest it. There's a lot of people like, no, we need to make a stand right now or we're going to lose all our freedoms. We as believers, we need to make a stand for righteousness first and foremost, and to consider our current situation as, unfortunately, biblically, I believe it is incumbent upon a believer to submit to the governing authorities at this point. I do believe a day is coming very soon where that is not going to be the case, where you're going to be hearing me sing a very different tune. Because do I think that what is happening currently right now and how they're responding to this virus is leading to something that is going to strip off more liberties and more freedoms? You better believe I do. I know that's coming. I know that's coming, unfortunately, and it pains me because I see it unfolding. I do. Under the current situation, though, and everything that is laid out before us, and what the government is still allowing, and I think we have to err on the side of Romans 13 and 1 Peter 2 and fight back a lot of emotions, and we have to trust in the Lord on this. And then as things develop, and things will develop, and I think we all can agree that we see where this is going and we don't like it. But when we get there, then we can make that stand. It's interesting that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego could live in Babylon, and they could even be being groomed, these great men, to be as part of their country and their system. And the only times you see any revolt is when they were pushed to worship another god. That's when Nebuchadnezzar, he crossed the line. Or when Daniel was given the delicacies of the king, which he would have crossed the line on the Levitical laws, the laws of food and what is kosher, and that's not even biblically kosher or not. And that's when he pulled back. But in all other respects, he didn't rebel against the system. We're living in very unique times right now. Very unique times, and it's kind of surreal. But based upon this coronavirus, whether you believe it's being manipulated or not, the public sees this as the well-being for the public. Whether that's true or not, we need to fall into line in regard to that for now. And when things begin to develop later on, then we can have another conversation. So I'm going to end it here, and you will be hearing more in regard to the legitimacy and the spirituality of what is happening in these days. I'll be doing more messages, Lord willing. And so with that, the Lord bless you and keep you. Amen.